Well, Laura, I really appreciate you being here with me on the Social Entrepreneurship and Innovation podcast. For folks who are unfamiliar with you and the work that you do, would you mind briefly introducing yourself?
Happy to, Corey. Well, I'm Laura Vicaria. I'm the CSR manager of Mud Jeans. Mud Jeans is a circular denim brand. Basically, what we do, we take back our old jeans, recycle them, and actually use them to make new pair of Mud Jeans. We're based in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and we are pioneers in the industry of circular denim.
So much of that we're going to get into in this conversation, but I'd like to start maybe where you wouldn't expect. I understand you've lived in a good few countries over the years. I'd be curious to hear which one feels closest to your heart.
Oh boy, that is a tough question. I have lived over 9 different countries in my life, more or less, if I'm counting correctly. My favorite, Israel was fantastic. But at the time I was a young teenager and school was incredible. Israel, Tel Aviv, Herzliya was beautiful. So I really have very fond memories of being a teenager there. And Rome, Italy was also very beautiful. I was in my mid-20s, had my own scooter, worked for the UN. It was really fun. So I cannot complain. I would say those are top 2 for sure. Excellent.
I love it. Well, and now you're based in the Netherlands, right? But we are recording this call, as you informed me, from you're in Nicaragua at the moment, right?
Yeah, Nicaragua. So if you hear any weird bird sounds in the background, that's why that is.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to know, Laura, how did you get connected to Mud Jeans? Because from what I understand, it's a fairly new role. Maybe in the grand scheme of your career. I'd love to know how y'all got connected and what appealed to you about the company and what they were doing.
Yeah, sure. You're absolutely right. Time passes by really fast. I'm now 2 years into the job. But before that, I was actually working for the Food and Organization of the United Nations at a very different role. It was more focused on trade-related type of policy stuff. And but really my objective from a long run was to mix my 2 passions, which is sustainability and fashion. And I was already in my mid-20s and I decided at that point, if you really want to work for sustainable fashion, you have to do it now. I felt like that it was really the moment to focus in my career in the direction that I really wanted before I specialized too much into something. Because you can do that very quickly. Once you step into the UN world, you'll end up being a specialist in cotton or trade or something random like that, which if it's what you're passionate about, that's fantastic. But for me, I was really passionate about the world of fashion because I connected to it from a creative perspective, but I also knew very well that it had tremendous potential from an environmental perspective. So I pushed for it and I really started to hunt for the best brands out there where I could maybe get my foot in the door. But never did I imagine that I would land this amazing opportunity with Mud Jeans. The reason why I am so proud to work for Mud Jeans is because of what they're doing. They're really pioneers in what circular denim is, which basically it goes beyond sustainability. It really looks at using all of the materials in the most effective way. And as we have seen from many reports that are slowly coming out, for example, from the Circular Economy Initiative, et cetera, circularity, while it is not necessarily the only solution for climate change, it is a very important one. And I think the whole fashion industry should start moving in that direction. So to be part of that conversation is really a dream come true.
I imagine so. Was it difficult for you to make that leap? From the United Nations to
Mud. Maybe more in the language part, the UN is very bureaucratic. And once you work for a brand, the challenge is always shifting your words to a softer language, a language that everyone can identify with and interact with. So that was maybe my challenge at a personal level, to just lower the whole academic lingo. You really have to translate it into softer language. And actually, that's the challenge, right? There's no point to having all of the academia know what they're talking about. Of course, they know what they're talking about. But we want everyone to know and understand and feel empowered when it comes to circular fashion. So yeah, and it's really exciting. Also, again, my job is to do all of the LCA and figure out all of the environmental, social part. But then I work very closely with the marketing team to ensure that this stuff doesn't get lost, so that we can communicate everything that we do in a good way.
And I'm wondering, I mean, you mentioned there very briefly what's unique about mud and just for one, using all the materials that are available very effectively and efficiently. But I'd love to kind of start maybe from an assessment of like a cultural standpoint. Like why do you think Mud Jeans is the way that it is as a brand?
Well, really, it all started with Bert van Saun. He is the founder of Mud Jeans, and he set up Mud Jeans back in 2012. He, at that time, already had over 10 years of experience seeing sort of the darker side of the fast fashion industry, both from a social and an environmental perspective. So he set off to build a brand that really demonstrated that there is an alternative to this fast fashion world. And what we're also very much trying to do as a brand, and when you talk about culture, and brands have a very big responsibility over this, is to drive a culture of slow fashion. And maybe we'll dig into that later on. I'm not sure. But it's really, about slowing things down, lowering that overconsumption, and really care about the way the product is made, which is very much the opposite of what the fast fashion industry is today.
Well, I'd love to go a bit deeper into that. I mean, particularly the conversation around slow fashion. If you could define that a bit further with what might be some tangible examples of that, and perhaps how that contrasts to the status quo of the fast fashion culture.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way is to start with fast fashion, and then it's easier to understand the slow fashion movement, right? Fast fashion is really this industry where they take everything off the runway and try to make it the fastest and cheapest way possible. They really don't care about quality or environmental impact or the people behind making those clothes. I mean, all they want is that the product is out in the market as fast as possible so people can consume it. In terms of culture, they also drive this culture of overconsumption. I need to have the latest piece, the latest trend. And the thing is, now it isn't just like a 2 seasonal collection or something like that. But Zara and H&M and all of these larger brands really have, I don't know at the top of my head right now, but I believe it's between 16 and 24 different collections coming through their stores. So every time you go in there, you go like, oh, I need to have this. So there is this big culture of, oh, I need to buy. And actually, I really don't care too much about my clothes, whether they're good or that I have to take care of them. And in fact, because I want new clothes next week, I'm just going to throw away, the clothes that I don't want. And it's this massive production, but also consumption that then leads to a huge increase of waste that comes from the industry. In fact, the fashion industry is accountable for 4% of the world's waste production. And that's quite a lot. So there is that. What's slow fashion? Slow fashion is the opposite. It's really, think of your grandparents, how they really have that like t-shirt or jacket or even pair of jeans that they have kept since, let's exaggerate a bit, but even maybe their 20s or 30s, right? It's really valuing your clothes, taking care of them, having these wardrobes of pieces that you can mix together and constantly just use those pieces instead of having a huge massive wardrobe of pieces that actually you're not even really using. It's really loving your fashion and identifying with the fashion style that you go for, and not so much going with the trends.
I love that. And coming from an outsider outside the fashion industry, and what I'm learning here too, I was sitting with it the other day as we're doing some kind of comprehensive writing on this topic, slow fashion in particular. I was thinking, like, some of it relates to me to this sense of like taking a pause as well, kind of creating my own definition here, but like taking the time to actually appreciate kind of what you mean exactly, the sense of value, but to appreciate the whole process of what goes into constructing a garment, from the very beginning of where we're sourcing the materials and the fibers to the folks who are, putting that very difficult job to task. And just taking that moment as we're considering acquiring new things or giving things away or disposing of something that we're wearing. I liked the concept of slow, to like slow down, and appreciate the whole experience there. Because there's fashion, the deeper that go into this, it's just, there's so many different avenues of both opportunity and obviously severe challenges. But I'd be interested to know, particularly, what's the issue with denim and jeans that may be a bit different from something else within fashion and apparel? Where are the biggest problems and complications in that process?
Yeah, I love that question. And it's also the reason why Mud Jeans decided to become Mud Jeans, why we chose denim. And that is because it is actually one of the dirtiest pieces in your wardrobe because of the amount of chemicals it uses and just resources it uses. So typically denim is made from cotton, and cotton requires a lot of water, and it requires a lot of insecticides and pesticides. Already this is a big problem, particularly if you start thinking about where this cotton is coming from. It requires that product to come to different locations to be used, and already that causes an immense impact. Then you look at how a pair of jeans is made. To obtain that, that dark blue color, you need to use an indigo dye that can be extremely toxic, and along with other toxic chemicals. And the dyeing process in itself is very high in water consumption, typically. So there is that. And then of course you have to make the fabric, and then you have to stitch it and cut it and make it. And finally, all denim starts in this dark blue that I explained before. And then different techniques, which are typically either, sandblasting or bleaching, again, really dirty stuff, are applied to it so you can get your worn out look or your lighter denim. So again, you're taking this fabric that is brand new, and then you're doing stuff to it so that you wash it out, make it look older, give it another color, or like a softer color, etc., which is crazy if you think about it. So once the customer gets the product, it's already been worn out. So yeah, that's a little bit the darker side of the denim industry. But where there is, a big issue, there's also great opportunity. And that's the way we see it at Mud Jeans. And we also decided to focus only on denim because actually everyone can identify with it, whether you are a fashionista or not, whether it's just what you like reach into your wardrobe and put on every day, it doesn't matter. Everyone has a pair of jeans. So that's a little bit also goes with our motto of really trying to revolutionize the fashion industry with a pair of jeans.
That was one of my following questions, was the curiosity of why jeans and the focus of denim specifically. But I love that there is some universality to it. Everyone has a pair of jeans, and they all look different as well, at the same time being very similar, which I love about it. Not wearing it right now. It's extremely hot in Boston, so I'll have to hold off until fall arrives. But Do you notice that the trends in how jeans are produced, the production process for denim do you see it from your lens? I mean, the specific lens of Mud Jeans is one, but industry wide, do you see that it is worsening as a process, like industry wide, like getting more destructive and negatively impactful? Or do you see widespread adoption of better practices and methodologies, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely the last option. I mean, I think there's definitely an improvement, and perhaps I'm an optimist, but and also perhaps it's my bubble and who I'm surrounding myself with. But overall, I have seen a big interest to improve overall, not the whole fashion production process, but focus in specific in jeans, definitely. There's really great initiatives, for example, from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They have started up a project called the Jeans Redesign Project, which is working with a bunch of brands and giving them guidelines on how to become more circular. And these touch on things like how to increase the quality of the jeans so that they can live longer, how to incorporate organic cotton. That already makes a huge difference. To use, to completely remove any toxic chemicals from production, recycle them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we worked with them to develop those guidelines, and we're also part of this initiative. And it's great to see. I mean, I think in there, if I'm not mistaken, as PVH and Tommy Hilfiger, I believe Zara or Inditex in general has also joined. There are a lot of these bigger brands that are forming part of this discussion and trying to learn how to do things better. Also, at a Dutch level, there is the denim deal that is being pushed by the Dutch government in support, which really is bringing all of the key players, let's say, in creating circular denim. So you have the sorters, the recyclers, the different manufacturers and the brands sitting at one table and figuring out how to increase the amount of jeans in the market that contain post-consumer recycled cotton, which is already a huge step. So I think definitely progress. And if anything, we see a huge push to really improve at a climate level, the whole industry. And I hope with the recent IPCC report, there will be an even bigger push. Let's see what happens.
What do you imagine are the tipping points on that to go from the stark reality of that specific report you're mentioning there to that being translated into meaningful and effective action? Like what do you think is teetering, or maybe things are already tipping in your opinion? I might just be in my own bubble.
Yeah, no, I think COVID did a lot of course, it was a very dark period for everyone, but it also had an interesting way of shifting everyone's mentality to take climate change more seriously and realize that actually we're all in the same boat. And that also translated to the fast fashion movement. For example, during the period, a lot of the big brands completely abandoned their manufacturers and canceled all of the orders, which then, of course, trickled down to them not being able to pay their workers and leaving them completely isolated and, with no money. So a lot of people highlighted that issue, well, once again, highlighting the dark side of the fashion industry. And I think it really hit home. We see a lot of people, customers pushing, wanting sustainable fashion, asking the hard questions, really wanting to know more. Everyone's also very much aware of the risks of greenwashing. So again, we see that a lot of customers are following their due diligence. We also saw, for example, the bigger brands like Gucci suddenly saying, hey, we're not going to do multiple collections. We're going to stick to 2, which is great. So there is definitely a movement. But to answer your question, sorry, about what is needed, I think we cannot wait until the consumer finally says, oh, we really want this, or ask them to push. That's really irresponsible for us to do that. In fact, it is the industry's responsibility to provide good products to the individual, to provide sustainable products. And again, being idealistic here. But how would that happen? And I think, well, in my personal opinion, it needs to come from policy. So, for example, with policies such as the extended producer responsibility, which basically says, okay, brands, you produce, but you need to take the responsibility over what happens to that product at the end of life. And that immediately will make a huge shift in brands saying, okay, whoa, all right, if that's the case, we need to rethink completely how we're making this, because we have to recycle it or reuse it or whatever, right? So imagine something like that. So I think policy has a huge role to play. So brands and NGOs and governments really need to start working together.
I'm with you on that. I certainly believe that we should use all the tools that are at our disposal. And so every sector, from consumer to government to the private sector, has responsibility. But I definitely agree with you. We can't wait for voluntary commitments to come into fruition, or as well to the markets to dictate when we're ready to address this climate crisis. So I appreciate the answer there. And so, speaking to brands taking that level of responsibility, you've woven in a few tidbits as to what Mud Jeans is doing to set this different standard. I'd be curious if we could dive deeper into that, as to, if we're thinking about a sustainable pair of jeans, and I'll let you define that, and a sustainable denim, with Mud Jeans as an example, what does that look like, so we can all get ourselves on the same page?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a couple of things to maybe break down here. So one thing is circularity. Circularity is really, again, like the opposite of a linear model, where it's, you make, or you take, make, use, and throw away. It's the opposite of that. It's trying to make a product so that it can be reused and reincorporated into the business over and over again. It's really about the effective use of materials and thinking about how you're making a product. And in that way, you are lowering the amount of new raw materials that need to be extracted from the earth, which actually, by the way, tends to be the biggest chunk of impact, environmental impact. So if you remove that and just start reusing your materials, you're having already a positive environmental impact, so to speak. There's that. And then sustainability extends beyond that, in that it equates the social aspect. So it's about being responsible about how you're producing things for the environment and your business model and everything, but also making sure that the people that are within your supply chain also benefit from fair working conditions, are paid well, and are more partners than just, people that are below your supply chain, which is unfortunately how the fashion industry works. There's a really strong power dynamic between the brand and the manufacturer. And there's a responsibility there to not have that, and really ensure that everyone benefits across the entire supply chain. So that's basically an overview of, or a brief definitions of those two concepts. What does Mud Jeans do? Well, as already stated in the introduction, we're a circular denim brand. And what that means is that we design with circularity in mind. So our jeans are, first of all, cross-seasonal, meaning that you can wear them across multiple seasons. And we design them with, there's more or less 7 fabrics, but they are all composed of between 23 and 40% post-consumer recycled cotton, and the rest is GOTS certified organic cotton. We limit our elastin to 2% because it allows us to recycle them, and it stops the contamination of the fiber. And again, we don't have many buttons or rivets. We only have one type of button, one type of rivet made out of stainless steel, so that we can recycle them. And finally, for example, we don't have the leather patch at the back. We have removed that, and it's a painted on version. Again, to lower the amount of extra material that goes into production, but it allows us also to recycle greater part of the product. So there's that. We design in that way. We also have a very short supply chain with 4 main supply chain partners. We're famous for our sales model, which is the lease a jeans model. Basically, this is a model where we lease our pair of jeans to our customers, and removing the environmental anxiety of owning a new product for customers, but instead giving them the experience of owning a new pair of jeans, but giving the responsibility to us. So once they're done using them, they send us back the jeans, and we take care of what happens to that product at the end of life. They get a discount on their next lease or their next purchase. But overall, we're just making sure that that pair of jeans, that material that we invested in, doesn't end up in a landfill, or incinerated, causing further environmental impact. And then the jeans that come back to us, they either are part of our vintage collection, which we sell on in other events, or they are recycled. And what that means is that they are shredded into small pieces, and those small pieces, small fibers, are blended back in with GOTS certified organic cotton, turned into yarn. That yarn is turned into fabric, and voila, you close the loop, right? And through that process, we're really trying to use our materials in the most effective way. And this really ensures that we have a minimal environmental impact. And throughout this entire process, we of course make sure that no toxic chemicals are used, and we choose supply chain partners that really reflect our values. And that extends to our sustainability values, which means that we want everyone across our supply chain to benefit from those fair working conditions that I was talking about before. And that's basically it. Sorry for rambling on, but that's the story.
No, it's a lovely overview. And I'm curious then as to, you came on to Mud Jeans to serve a particular role 2 years ago. I'm curious, what sort of progress did you have to make? Like when you came in, was it related to that exact production process, or was it focused elsewhere? Because that is a wonderful overview, and I think certainly everything that we aspire to. But I'm wondering to know, like, where have we come from, and then as well, like where does Mud Jeans still need to make progress? But I'll let you answer the first part.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. When you walk into a circular brand, it's pretty easy, quote unquote, because you know that sustainability and circularity is already being supported from the top, which means the CEO is already like, all right, Laura, we're circular pioneers. How do we get there? So, or, how do we stay there? And I was lucky enough also that my predecessor already had done a lot of great work in developing a sustainability report and giving structure to that department of sustainability. Then I came in, and basically the sort of things that I managed to tick off the bigger list was we completed a reassessment of our B Corp. So we are a benefit corporation, and this is really focused on businesses that want to use their business as a force for good. And it involves a very, solid assessment of a business, and you need to score above 80. And we actually, scored 124 points, which is, one of the top marks in Europe. And we were actually nominated best for the world from an environmental perspective. So we were really happy to do that. Then what we also worked on was furthering our knowledge of the environmental impact of our entire supply chain. So I worked in collaboration with EcoChain, and with them, we developed a life cycle analysis. And we developed this LCA for every single style in our collection. we didn't want to just focus on averages, and we didn't want to base it on data sets that came from somewhere else. So we really worked with our suppliers to get their direct data. So we wanted to know, how much water do you use? How much electricity do you use? What chemicals do you use? And so we plug that all into the system, and it helps us calculate the exact environmental impact of that style. And from there, we can then actually develop further strategies to lower our environmental impact, which is fantastic. So in fact, today, a pair of mud jeans consumes, so from water terms, 477 liters, which you would think, okay, that's a lot. But compared to industry standard that consumes 7,000 liters of water, that's a 93% difference in water consumption. Compared to CO2, so our mud jeans today on average consume 6.10 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And compared to industry standard, this is a 74% difference, which is fantastic. But we're always striving for that continuous improvement. So your question was, so Laura, what is really your role and what do you do? My job is to make sure that we're always striving for that continuous improvement. How do we keep on leaping for those extra things that might actually inspire other brands to join our circular movement and say, hey, this is possible, and there's actual business benefits behind it. So for example, we have also, one of the leading things that we have worked on is measuring our biodiversity impact. We are, to our knowledge, we have done quite a lot of research. We are the only denim brand that measures its impact also across its biodiversity impact. And from an industry standard perspective, based on the calculations we did, we have a 51% lower biodiversity impact than industry standard. So this is some of the work that we've been doing. And it's essential because you cannot really bring change to your company without understanding what the impact of your company is. Yeah, that's basically the work that we have been doing. And it's a lot of, my job, for example, is a lot of interacting with the different departments within the team, whether it's marketing, which is product development, even finance. You have to figure out how to translate all of the work we're doing across those different departments and also empower those departments so that they feel also that they can bring forward those missions in their own departments, basically.
But one thing you mentioned particularly about the example of being an example and inspiring other brands to see y'all and have this sense that, oh wow, there are these things that can be done that can make a significant positive impact or perhaps reduce a negative impact. Along those lines, if you were to say, for example, step into another fashion brand, maybe not exclusively one in denim and jeans, what might be some advice or initial things if you're giving them a consult of sorts to look at initially to reduce their impact? Where are maybe some common, biggest detractors for folks?
Well, definitely is to have transparency over your supply chain. Yes, transparency, give that transparency to your customers, but more importantly, it's about knowing exactly where every single piece of your product comes from. To have that overview is already a huge step, because once you know that, then you can start identifying ways of improving that, whether it is working with those suppliers or finding new ones. Whichever is the best fit for your company or brand. And then from there is looking at your virgin materials. That tends to be the location where you have the majority of your impact. It's that and energy. So looking at your virgin materials, looking what you can do better. So don't use conventional cotton if you can use organic cotton. And if you can use recycled cotton, even better. I'm stating here in case, in the event that cotton is the material that's being used, right? And then also, and this of course depends on the size of the company, renewable energy is a big part of of making that improvement. But of course, none of this really helps. Well, it helps, but it loses value if you're not measuring it. Because unfortunately, still today, you need to demonstrate, okay, what are we improving here from a sustainability perspective, and what are its benefits? And those need to translate also from a financial perspective, from a business perspective, etc. So numbers go really a long way. So measuring. And finally, is really, as a brand, to commit to the net zero movement and just start. You don't need to be perfect. Don't be afraid to have a few bumps. We all have them. We're all learning. But it's making that commitment and setting up a strategy. And from there, you already have a lot to do. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's quite the to-do list. And speaking specifically to the recycled cotton, the post-consumer recycled cotton, what stuck out to me was that's a goal of y'all's to have achieved 100% post-consumer recycled cotton in your production process by, I think, 2025. And I started to wonder where are we at with that, and then what are the barriers that are like, why aren't we there just yet?
Yeah. I love that you asked this question, because actually it's a project that we're super excited about. It's called the Road to 100, and we're working in collaboration with Saxion University. Actually, they are the fantastic scientists behind the work that we're doing. So to give a little background, as I mentioned, we use up to 40% post-consumer recycled cotton. And this cotton is mechanically recycled. And as I've explained previously, what that means is that you're basically shredding the fiber. And what that causes is that the fiber that's left over is really short. So when you start blending that in, you end up with a yarn that if you have too much post-consumer in there, it's going to be a very weak yarn. And then that translates into a very weak fabric. And that's the limitation. So above 40, you start having really bad quality denim, which is then counterproductive to our whole mission of durability, right?
Right.
So we set off, okay, how can we do this better? We want to use post-consumer. Why post-consumer? Because it goes back to this concept of, taking responsibility over our own waste. There's brands that are using bed sheets and these type of things, which is not necessarily a bad thing, or what you call pre-industrial waste, which is just like, old fabric or things that were left over. It's not a bad thing, but for us, really, our focus was to really take responsibility of our own waste. So we needed to figure out how to improve that yarn quality while still recycling post-consumer cotton, or using, post-consumer cotton. So we set off on this mission, and actually what we came up with was to incorporate the mechanical recycling, but also use what we call molecular recycling, which is in essence chemical recycling. And what that does is just melt down the cotton, the fiber, and then it becomes this liquid form. And in a water base, you kind of stretch it out. And you use that fiber and you mix those two together to create a final product. Why are we not using 100% just the chemically recycled? And this is the challenge that you were asking about. Because, if you use only chemically recycled cotton, you end up with a very soft fabric, kind of like a silk or a viscose, which is, by the way, the viscose or tencel that maybe people can relate to, which is just a very soft and floppy type of material, which is great, but it's not the denim feel that people really want. So by mixing those two, you can create the look and feel and still have that 100%. So here's the challenge. The challenge is, what's the best percentage mix? And that's kind of like what we're doing now. We are testing out what are those best percentage mixes and then figure out the best combination. So we hope by the end of 2020 to actually have the first sample of a pair of jeans that is 100% made from post-consumer recycled cotton, which would be, absolute, victory and glory. We can't wait. I mean, fingers crossed. But from there, the next big challenge is how to bring that to scale and how to get enough, post-consumer recycled cotton, how to collect that and how to get that to locations so that we can use that effectively.
I love hearing about where the edge is at for brands like Mud, like the work that y'all are doing, because it's like it does seem like, man, they have so much figured out, which is really admirable. And I love to hear these sectors of like, where are the edges of the problems that y'all are still working on and solving?
Well, let's see. There's always little challenges, right? So, for example, our buttons, they are stainless steel, but how can we remove them better? And how can we get them removed so that it can be recycled? Figuring out the logistics and the supplier for that can be tricky. The stitching yarn that we use, these are small little details, but hey, if we find solutions, the better, right? It's still made with a polyester-based sort of interior. It has a cotton exterior, but the interior is poly-based. So that's not good. And also our elastin. We have a 2% elastin limit on our denim. But again, it's poly-based. So we want to find a better solution for that. But when it comes to finding biodegradable or recycled-based elastin, all of these have a limitation to them. And so we need to figure out, okay, what can we work with? What can't we? So those from a design perspective are a little bit the challenges. And then looking at, how to grow, how to scale up, but in a genuine way that still, matches very much our values and everything that represents circularity. Because we, of course, want to stay genuine to what we represent, but we also know that having a little bit of a bigger size, just a little bit bigger size, gives you a louder voice in the industry and gives you the opportunity to have more influence over the industry and allows us to, for example, easily get Mud Jeans in the US. We don't have that yet, right? We want everyone to have access to sustainable products. So that is a much bigger question, which we're still figuring out how to do, to be really honest with you.
I'm always curious about that concept of scale as well for brands like Mud Jeans, because that it's been a word that I think has been kind of grossly molded by kind of tech Silicon Valley here in the United States, scaling things for the sake of scaling things, when often I think people don't even know really what the word means. But I always wonder that of like, what is the concept of growth that brands like Mud are trying to achieve? Because there is something that seems inherent with, they're wanting to perhaps grow, but in exactly as you meant, a way that feels very authentic, genuine, and I guess controlled in a sense to where, you do have a good handle on what is the whole, the externalities that are created, the impact that's created by being a bigger size.
So, sorry, Corey, what exactly is the question? Like how to do that genuinely, or? No,
I mean, it's not so much a question, but just kind of an expression of, I wonder that it's just an open-ended kind of wondering and curiosity, because it sounds like it's an internal dialogue that y'all are going through as well.
It is completely. And so, we are not sure yet how to, what are we aiming for? What's the right number? And as you get bigger, that comes with the challenges of, okay, we have more suppliers. How do we regulate all of that? And having full transparency and traceability over all of that. That's something that we value a lot. We have chemical policies and code of conducts that we ask all of our suppliers to sign, but also you have to be diligent and make sure that those are actually followed. But it's really interesting. So, for example, we just had a great collaboration with IKEA. the beloved IKEA, we developed a clip-on cover, a denim circular clip-on cover with them, and we're super proud of it. And in fact, we just recorded a podcast with IKEA, and the conversation was very much on this concept of scale, and that we both kind of helped each other with the different things that we brought to the table. In that we sort of had all this knowledge about circularity, which they were very curious about because they have all of these circular objectives. In fact, they want to be fully circular by 2030. But then they have the scale. And for us, that's really exciting because they give us this platform to really bring out the message of the value of circularity to a whole huge group of people. So, and IKEA is actually doing a really great job by working with them. I really noticed how diligent they are with everything that they do in terms of all of the suppliers they choose and all of the different strategies that they have. They really are a great company. And of course, they might not have a full handle on the whole circularity thing. Who knows? Maybe in the future they will be very strong in that world. But something like that, I mean, IKEA is huge. I think he was telling me that it's like they use 1% of cotton or wood in the world. So really, they're huge, and we don't aim to be that size. But I think that there's definitely companies out there that can demonstrate how to do things properly, for sure.
Well, maybe further along those lines, with IKEA perhaps being one, who are other brands or maybe organizations generally in fashion that are inspiring y'all with your work at Mud Jeans?
Well, maybe not so. I mean, fashion specific. I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is great. They're doing a lot of cool work in doing the nitty gritty in terms of policy work and working with the government and carrying out the research that maybe brands just don't have the focus to have. And also they're doing great work in bringing brands together and showing them how to make improvements. So they're great. Circle Economy also has a textile unit, and they're doing also some great work, again, research-based on the fashion world. Fashion and shoes, which is also important to consider. That I think the shoe sector is actually quite ignored when we talk about sustainability, and it's increasing in traction there. So, yeah, I think they have been really exciting. And non-fashion, we are a B Corp, so we love to work with people that are leaders in their own fields. And so, for example, Tony Chocolonely, they are a chocolate brand, chocolate manufacturer, and they just do fantastic stuff when it comes to, well, first ending the slavery behind the cocoa production process, but in general, just from a social perspective, they're super, super strong, and we love working with them because they're really inspirational. Then we started working with Just Dig It. Again, they are a Dutch-based NGO, and what they do, they regrow trees. They regrow tree stumps. So they're doing a lot of work in terms of nature-based solutions to climate change. But instead of planting trees, and when it comes to planting trees, there's always the risk that you're planting the wrong breed and it's not actually helping biodiversity. So what they do is, in the region of Tanzania, they work with the local communities to regrow trees. So regrow tree stumps. And when they do that, immediately, yes, you're rebuilding biodiversity, but you're also capturing CO2. You're improving the land's ability to absorb water, which then trickles down to improving sustainable agriculture techniques and helping local communities. So we love those type of initiatives and concepts, and we support them as well. Those are a few, for example.
Excellent. Well, Laura, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for this in-depth discussion. But before we wrap up, could I ask you a few rapid fire questions?
Go for it. I'm scared. Let's do it.
All right. Well, first, what might be your top one or two tips for a consumer, someone who's purchased a pair of jeans, to in their care and maintenance of them to lower their environmental impacts and make them last the longest?
I love this question. Well, take care of them. Don't tumble dry them. Don't tumble dry them. Okay. Wash them and put them to just, dry in your room and just typical line dryer. That is the most sustainable thing that you can do. Wash it in cold water. That has such a difference when it comes to impact. And then, sounds silly, but don't be afraid to pick up, a needle and a thread in case you rip them and you want them fixed. I mean, you really can learn anything on YouTube these days, and stitching up your pair of jeans is pretty simple. And just love them, really. And then when you don't want them, just gift them, swap them, sell them on Vinted or whatever platform is best in your region. Because really, I'm confident somebody else will use them. And that has such a big positive impact.
Excellent tips. Next one for you. What's maybe one book, film, or other resource that you might recommend? Something that maybe you always come back to, or something that's impacted you recently?
Well, there's two. I just finished reading the Fashionopolis book by Dana Thomas, I believe that's her name. And I really enjoyed that book. It gives you a whole overview of the fast fashion world, but where its impact is. And if anyone is really curious to understand the denim industry a little bit better, there's a great chapter on that on there too. And from a podcast perspective, I really love the Wardrobe Crisis by Claire Press. She's so good and has so many great topics and people coming on to tell their stories, and they're truly inspiration.
Lovely. And then what's one morning routine or daily habit that you absolutely have to stick to, if anything?
Morning routine. I need to take an hour every morning just to myself, whether it is researching a topic I love, doing a course that inspires me. And after that hour, then I can start working because I feel better after that, just taking some space for myself.
I like that. And one last question for you, Laura. What's one bit of advice that you might leave our listeners with? These folks are social entrepreneurs, change makers from all sectors all over the world.
Well, folks, really, we all have a role to play in this climate, situation that we're all facing. So as intimidating as it may feel and as big as a problem as it may seem, because it is, but we all have a role to play. And I think every little bit counts. So just start and read and listen to different things that make you feel inspired and motivated and empowered. Because there are a lot of stuff out there that makes you feel tiny and overwhelmed and like the world's going to finish and end in the next day. Stay away from those. Really focus on the people that inspire you and just start. Just start.
Excellent advice to end on. Finally, where should we keep up with you and Mud Jeans? Where should folks go?
Oh, love it. Well, we have all of our social media platforms, the typical things, Mud Jeans on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. And also, please check out our website. We also just released our new 2020 sustainability report and life cycle assessment report. So if you're curious to know more, I really encourage it. And that's www.mudjeans.eu.
Perfect. We'll have all things Mud Jeans linked up in the show post at growensemble.com. Laura, thank you so much once more for taking the time.
Thanks, Corey.